Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Across the Pond podcast with Lindsey, Director of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance Consumer Centre, and me, International Fellow. And our guest today is, we shouldn't need much introduction, it's Dr. Konstantinos Farsalinos, very well known in harm reduction circles. And it's great to have you here, Konstantinos.
Thank you very much, Martin and Lindsey. Hello, everyone. And I'm sure that we're going to have a very constructive debate once again, because it's always been a pleasure to discuss with you things related to tobacco harm reduction.
Well, I want to interrupt too real quickly. Thank you again for coming down to Panama and being a good cop expert. It was really fun to have a bunch of the science guys, is what I call all of you doctors in this space.
Yeah, we'll start on that. Shall we? So what were your thoughts on Panama? You came to our meeting, the Good Cop conference, and what are your thoughts on the WHO and the FCTC COP10 and how it ended up?
Well, I think first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to this meeting. And I think it was really a good idea to do a meeting at the same time and at the same place as the FCTC. Unfortunately, the FCTC, again, the COP, once again, verified our expectations, our very low expectations. And the only expectation you can have from the WHO right now concerning harm reduction is to postpone decisions. And this is very unfortunate, because over the years, we have seen growing evidence about the harm reduction potential of all nicotine products, particularly electronic cigarettes. The literature is massive, but they don't even acknowledge the literature. Imagine that today in 2024, they still suggest that we don't have evidence that e-cigarettes help people quit, which is unheard of. The latest study, which was released in late, I think early February, was the first study to compare e-cigarettes with the best smoking cessation medication, which is varenicline. It was e-cigarettes were equivalent in efficacy to varenicline, but varenicline isn't available in the Western world. It has been withdrawn. So that study showed that e-cigarettes are the best smoking cessation tool that we have today, period. And still the WHO disputes the fact that it helps people quit smoking. It is unbelievable. I mean, nothing changes today than what they were saying 10 years ago, when we didn't have the evidence. And up to a point, it would be acceptable to express such reservations and such concerns. But today, we have randomized controlled trials. We have meta-analysis of evidence from the Cochrane library showing that it works and it is more effective than NRTs. We have evidence now that it's equally effective to varenicline, the best smoking cessation medication that we don't have right now available in the market. So it's a disappointment. Let's consider it a disappointment. Once again, however, it's one disappointment after the next. That's our experience with WHO.
So what would you say is driving this? Because they seem to be ignoring the science. You're a scientist. What do you think's behind all that? Is it just stubbornness, or is there something more sinister than that?
I think it's pure predisposition, and as I mentioned during our meeting in Panama, it is a war against nicotine and not against smoking. It is a war against morality and behaviors and not against harm. And that's not public health. This is judging people's behavior. It's not public health. This is a political, emotional, and largely pseudo-moralistic, that's what I would say, issue that has nothing to do with public health, with harm, disease, and death caused by smoking. They have almost stopped talking about smoking. They talk about harm reduction products. And as another thing that I mentioned in one of our panels in Panama was that it's not a problem of the empower principles that they have established a long time ago concerning the actions that governments should take in order to combat smoking. The problem today is that they apply these empower principles to harm reduction products, which is completely inappropriate, let alone that they basically ignore their own article and principle, which is that harm reduction plays a pivotal role in combating smoking. It is mentioned in the FCTC rulebook and in their principles, and they have completely ignored that. It's a complete disappointment. That's the only thing that someone can say. However, it also shows the lack of credibility of the WHO, and we should all say it loudly and clearly. This will result in a loss of credibility for an organization that has the potential to do a lot of good to humanity. And when you start losing credibility, then they're not going to believe you even when you are absolutely right. So they need to think about their reputation and their credibility and how they sacrifice all this just because of their ideological war against nicotine, their moralistic war, which has, as I said, nothing to do with public health.
Yeah, and it does seem good. Go ahead,
speaking of public health, and I know it's a little bit off topic, but it does kind of go with the WHO. You did a lot of research on COVID and the effects of nicotine and smoking and, incidences of COVID in people. And I know I was looking into it at the States, and I know our state, our health department, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, was a little bit more nefarious because then they started kind of hiding this data. I know because they used to give us the data, and you saw this really weird thing that people who smoked were less likely to get, be among COVID patients, which is really, really wonky given that it was a respiratory illness. Can you talk a little bit about your research on that, and also this whole lack of credibility when it comes to the scientists who are in charge of telling the world something when they kind of seem like they're burying data and information that could be for beneficial?
Well, I have a very nice story to share with the audience, and some probably don't know it, others know it. It's not only that. We were, of course, the first to present the case of lower prevalence of hospitalized COVID patients among smokers in hospitalized COVID patients, compared to what you would expect, for example, when you look at the smoking rates in China, but also in other countries. We did some meta-analysis, 2 or 3 were published. We never talked about smoking being a cure or a preventative measure for COVID. We never even discussed about any harm reduction product being used as a preventative measure for COVID. But we always discussed about the potential and the possibility that nicotine has some beneficial effects, and that there are medications which can be used even through inhalation. You can put some nicotine liquid into a nebulizer. And we only discussed about medication. So we also presented a hypothesis on how the virus interacts with acetylcholine receptors, where nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, the alpha-7 variant in particular, and how this has an effect. Now, not only was it ignored or tried to be debunked, we were, and I was personally attacked for alleged total imaginative funding through an article at the British Medical Journal from a group of journalists called Investigative Desk, for whom I found out through a Freedom of Information request from the University of Bath that this investigative group was funded by Bloomberg. And in fact, I have an official document from the university saying that the journalists should never acknowledge to anyone that they have received funding from Bloomberg. I got them through a freedom of information request from the university, and I was not allowed to respond to the BMJ article, because you know that these articles they give everyone the possibility to respond. I was not allowed to respond. At some point, they allowed me to respond, but with a text that was formatted by the lawyers of BMJ. And I explained to them that I got these documents perfectly legally. I emailed the university and they emailed me back after a few days. I didn't, got them through any, secret source. And I had to write a whole essay, several pages, and publish it in Chaos, which is a preprint server, in order to respond to an article that mentioned my name personally, but the journal did not allow me to respond. And what I was saying in reality is that the journalists accused me falsely of having conflicts of interest that I didn't declare. At the same time, it was the journalists who had conflict of interest and they didn't declare it. It's that simple.
Incredible.
It is that simple. And this is how tobacco control works. This is exactly how it works. Let's be honest.
We were talking.
Do as I say, not as I do.
We were talking just before we started recording about, you've just brought back from Brussels, and you were saying all these conferences, they hit on the same topics. It's youth vaping, it's nicotine, it's addiction. And we've just had in the UK a vape tax announced in the budget, which is solely based on the fact that the government is saying they want to reduce the use of nicotine. I mean, it's irrelevant. They're trying to compare how much nicotine is in e-liquid to compare with what nicotine is in a cigarette. It's irrelevant, isn't it?
First of all, I think that what they did, when you look at average liquid consumption per user, what they did was put higher tax on e-cigarettes compared to the one-off tax that they added for tobacco cigarettes, which is unheard of and a big disappointment for a country like the UK, which has been the leader in harm reduction with amazing results already for years, not now. So another problem, which is probably an outcome of the latest Tobacco Products Directive regulation in the EU, is this demonization of nicotine and setting limits on nicotine concentrations, which we know, and there is evidence, there are studies now, that they cause harm to smokers, and there are two ways through which it causes harm. The first is that many smokers cannot be satisfied with the 20 milligram per milliliter limit, and basically they fail to quit, and it's not a problem of the product, it's because the product is restricted by the regulation. And the second is that we already have evidence that if you force vapers to consume lower nicotine concentration liquids, what they do to satisfy, of course, their individual needs of nicotine is that they consume more liquid. And because all emissions in e-cigarettes do not correlate with nicotine concentration, they all correlate with the amount of liquid consumed. And that's why in all my studies, I report all the emissions in amount per gram or per milliliter of liquid, because it is directly dependent on the liquid consumption. So when you force consumers to increase liquid consumption, you basically force them to increase their exposure to the minimal level of toxins that are available, that are present in e-cigarette aerosol. But it doesn't matter. There is no reason why you should force the consumer to increase his exposure to potentially harmful toxins. So it makes zero sense. And such a punishment is also being created through the regulation, the taxation schedule in the UK, because it's going to force people to use lower nicotine liquids, lower nicotine concentration liquids, and this will inevitably increase their consumption. And it's going to cause harm. End of story. So at the same time, why do you think that vaping rates among youth is going to be reduced through the taxation? No, it's going to create a black market. It's very easy for these products to have to create a black market. It's going to be a big opportunity for criminal gangs to engage into illicit trade of such products. And in that case, this is when the government is going to have no control, not only in the marketing and targeting of consumers, but also in the quality standards of these products. So it's going to cause, there is a lot of potential harm from this decision, which probably was never examined before making the decisions. Now, I think that the tax is going to be introduced in 2026, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So hopefully there is enough time to explain to them that it's a mistake, and they should find other ways of addressing a potential issue rather than punish smokers, punish products which in reality are not used by youth, and adding a tax which is at a higher level with the harm reduction product compared to the tobacco cigarette. It makes no sense. And it's a big step back for a country which has been globally the leader, let's be honest.
Yeah. Lindsey, that's what happened in America, really, wasn't it? The black market, and they're banned substances, and yet they're all over the USA, aren't they?
Well, I mean, the disposables, I will apologize every time that we get it, you know, sorry world, we're the ones who gave you disposables, okay? And that was because of the knee-jerk reaction of banning flavored pots, and who knew that they were going to be able to be exported everywhere. Welcome to a global economy. It's funny how that works. Going into that though, first, Dr. Farsalinos, I actually used one of your surveys that you did of like nearly 7,000 adult vapors, and you know, finding that overwhelmingly the majority of these participants were using fruit and dessert flavors. That's like the direct quote I use. So state lawmakers do get to hear. One of these days I'll put you on get you talking to them. They only give you 2 minutes to speak, but can you talk more about your survey that you did? I know it just recently got published as well.
Yeah, probably you mean the latest survey, which is not 7,000, it's 70,000.
Sorry, 70,000, yes.
About 69,500 unique entries, because we had more entries, but we removed double entries based on the IP address. And I understand that in some cases there may be two vapors in the same place sharing the same internet connection who could be two different persons entering the survey, but we had to exclude using the IP address. We had no other choice, understanding that maybe we excluded people who were not in reality double entries. But, well, yeah, we found that not only at the beginning, at the initiation of a-cigarette use, but over time, and especially at the time of quitting smoking, there is a very much predominant use of non-tobacco flavors. And I'm going to give you now another story, some news that our next publication from this survey is going to be a comparison between young adults aged 18 to 24 and adults in the choice and patterns of flavored e-cigarette use at the time of quitting smoking. So these are going to be all former smokers, and we are going to compare young adults with adults in their flavor choice. And I can tell you from now, because I've done the analysis, that young adults are more likely to use non-tobacco flavors than adults in order to quit smoking at the period of quitting smoking, which is something that no one has addressed till now. Everyone is talking about young adults that are more prone to use non-tobacco flavors, but no one has shown that you know, they use them in order to quit smoking too. Some of them, many of them. No one has ever thought that that's an interesting question to address. We are going to address that. But that's not only surveys. We have also longitudinal evidence, I mean, other studies, not my studies, showing that the use of non-tobacco flavors increases the odds of quitting smoking. There is a study from the PUF survey in the US. There is a study from the ITC group, which is following up smokers in several countries, in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK, and the US, which have shown that the use of non-tobacco flavors are associated with 60 to more than 100% higher odds of quitting smoking for smokers. There is also, in 2022, in the journal Nicotine and Tobacco Research, a systematic review of the literature examining more than 100 studies. It was, if I remember well, 104 studies, to examine which are the factors that create more appeal for smokers, for adult smokers, to use e-cigarettes. And they found that two are the main determinants of the appeal of these harm reduction products among smokers. One was, and it's exactly our discussion, one factor was higher nicotine levels, and the second one was variability of flavors. And so, in reality, parts of the tobacco control movement is targeting and is attacking the main determinants of the success rate of e-cigarettes among smokers. Isn't that ironic? It's nicotine levels and flavors. And these are the two main determinants of their success. And they are targeting that, exactly that. In fact, we've seen studies where tobacco control scientists suggest that we should make e-cigarettes horrible, to taste like rubbish. Well, yeah, but how are you going to convince a smoker to use something which is awful in order to quit smoking? It doesn't work like that, you know. It doesn't work like that. E-cigarettes, and I think we've this has been removed today from the discussion, but it was a very prevalent discussion in early 2010s, 2012, 13, 14. E-cigarettes do not work as medications. They do not work as a treatment therapeutic option. You don't prescribe 10 puffs in the morning, 10 at noon, and 10 in the afternoon. You don't prescribe specific dosage or time intervals between doses. You don't dictate how they are used. They are used based on self-preference. They address the pleasure that unfortunately people get from smoking, and we're just trying to help them substitute the pleasure from smoking with the pleasure from using an alternative low-risk product. If you make this horrible, then who is going to use it? No one. You make the product useless. So I don't know, is this really the goal of the tobacco control movement, to make harm reduction products useless so that there is no reason for them to exist? I don't know. They're trying to make it something like an NRT. And I'm mentioning NRTs as an example because we know from real world studies that they have almost zero effect as smoking substitutes, almost zero. So if we want to create a new NRT, we don't need another one. We already have one failure. There is no reason to create a second failure. E-cigarettes are different from NRTs, and that's why they are effective. By trying to imitate NRTs, we're going to just imitate the failure of NRTs to work. And there's no reasoning behind that.
I've got one last question because we're keeping on time, obviously. But what you say there is, it seems to be the focus is almost all on nicotine now, rather than you know, tobacco harm, which is daft enough. But you know, I've seen increasingly in discussions on this, people are saying, oh, more and more people who are vaping never smoked before. They've gone straight into vaping. Now, I look at that and think, well, this surely is progress because they're not smoking. I mean, is that too difficult a concept for the average person to understand? Because it seems like they just don't understand that at all.
the discussion is similar to saying that we should ban beer because people who didn't drink beer in the past are drinking whiskey today. And since we want to avoid people drinking whiskey, we should ban beer. Makes zero sense. First of all, let's differentiate the ideal non-existing world with realism. Yeah. So in realistic conditions, there will be people who drive without a driving license and start learning how to drive at a very young age when they are not supposed to do it. There are people engaged into harmful behaviors or use of harmful substances which are basically even considered completely illegal. There are traffic accidents in this world because we cannot have a perfectly safe car and motorcycle industry. But we don't ban seatbelts because they normalize driving when you don't need to drive. We don't ban helmets because they normalize using the motorcycle not only to go to work, but also to have fun. This is a discussion that has any value only if you are dreaming about the ideal world where there is going to be no abuse of any substance, no misuse of any of the services, when there is zero risk from anything. And we fail to realize that harm reduction for smoking is nothing different from wearing a seatbelt when we drive and we go with our families for vacation to have fun, taking the risk and accepting the risk. That's called informed decision. We use helmets to drive motorcycles. We look on both sides of the street before crossing the street. These are harm reduction. We don't stay at home, 24/7, or we just go to work and then come back home because we need to feel safe. We take risks every day, calculated risks, informed risks, because that's how life goes. So we want to help smokers. It is inevitable that you are going to have some non-intended use, whether it's youth, whether it's non-smoking adults, whatever. That's not going to be zero ever. But that's not a justification to ban or restrict the product. It's only a justification to implement the best possible rules and regulations in order to reduce this effect. But it's also another opportunity to think that maybe having access to these products will prevent some people from initiating smoking or from relapsing back to smoking, even for those people who had quit long time ago without using any alternative product. And we know that this exists. However, a large part of the scientific community calls that gateway to smoking effect. That's how they call it. When they have former smokers who quit by themselves or with medications, and suddenly they see that some of them initiate e-cigarette use and some of them may also relapse. No one has ever thought that these people were prone and about to relapse to smoking and they tried the e-cigarette just as an effort to avoid this relapse. No, it's a gateway to smoking effect. And they talk about gateway to smoking effects for US adolescents at a time when smoking has been virtually eliminated among US youth. It's zero. It's a smoke-free generation. And they are talking about a gateway to smoking effect while the smoking rates have declined at the fastest rate ever during the period of growing e-cigarette popularity. But still, it's a gateway effect. It doesn't make any sense. But these are arguments that, in my opinion, are being made politically in order to influence political decisions and regulations. That's my opinion. It's very unfortunate because it's a misuse and it's an abuse of science in order to support predetermined decisions. Unfortunately, instead of political decisions on public health issues being driven by science, we have science being used in a way that it supports the already made political decisions. And it makes zero sense. It's the exact opposite from what we are supposed to do.
Do you have any last question, Lindsey? Or
No, I think that's a depressing note to end it on, but I do think it kind of sums it up. This whole
it's not only depressing, but it's also the motivation to continue our work.
Exactly. Yes, to keep combating the misinformation in science and the abuse of science. It's unfortunate. Do you have anything to add, Martin?
no, I think as you said, I like that last message, is just carry on, because it can be depressing sometimes, but you just got to carry on. We know the science is on our side. We know that we're on the side of the angels, as I always say. We're on the side of public health, and they're not.
Well, Dr. Farsalinos, did you use e-cigarettes to quit smoking?
Yes, I was. First of all, let me tell you, I've used every available smoking cessation medication multiple times, with the exception of NRTs, which I tried them only once for a few hours, and they were completely useless. And I've succeeded repeatedly with medications, which means by definition that I have also relapsed repeatedly. I've tried both varenicline and bupropion in the past because I was a smoker. The last time I quit smoking, I managed to quit by e-cigarettes, and it happened by pure chance. I mean, I wanted to quit, and that's why I made all these efforts with medications. And I did it because I started doing research on e-cigarettes, and I was a smoker at that time. And the first study that I did was recruit some vapers from an online forum here in Greece to come to the hospital and do some tests. And that's how I was educated about e-cigarettes, because at the beginning, when I started doing research on the products, I was a complete ignorant. I didn't know how these products work. I didn't know why people try and use some huge device at that time. I'm talking about late 2011 to early 2012. Yeah. Suppose you remember what kind of devices were available at that time. Yeah. And they were horrible, but there were some really big devices, and I didn't understand why some people felt the need to use these, huge and bulky devices. I got educated, and that was the last and final time I quit smoking, and I've been smoke-free for 12 years. But it's not an issue of personal preference. I think that the only thing that we should discuss on that is that it has given me a lot of experience on the use of these products as a consumer. But other than that, in fact, I'm more motivated to find what's wrong with the device, with the product, in order to do efforts to improve that, rather than to try to hide, facts and wrongs about mistakes, problems with these devices, because it's affecting me personally too. So it's a motivation to be even stricter in terms of quality criteria and safety criteria, but at the same time, we need to be realistic, because we know that in public health, what matters is both the reduction in harm, but also the appeal. You can make a perfectly safe product that no smokers wants to use. This is going to have zero public health effect. And this is the example of NRTs, let me tell you. On the contrary, you can make a product which is, of course, of very, very low harm, but not harmless. But because it is very appealing for smokers, it's going to have a huge impact on public health. And this is snus in Sweden and other Scandinavian countries, e-cigarettes in the UK, and in, I don't know if there are any countries which support e-cigarettes in the same way that UK has done so far. I'm not going to talk about the future now. Yeah. So this is a basic principle on public health. Let's hope that they will hear us at some point, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying. Well, Martin, do you want to kick it off? You want me to kick it off?
Well, no, just thanks everyone for watching. Thank you, Dr. Farsalinos, for coming and talk to. I could talk to
Thank
you.
you very much, very
I
much.
could listen
Thank
to
you
you all
very
day,
much.
and I think many other consumers could as well. So tune in next time, everyone, for the next episode. We've got another one coming up for recording, in being planned at the moment. So we'll see you next time. From me and Lindsey and Dr. Farsalinos, goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.